If you have ever finished and immediately wondered whether you just did something harmful to your body, whether you are draining your testosterone, damaging your prostate, or somehow using up a limited lifetime supply of something you cannot get back, I need you to hear this clearly. Almost everything you have heard about this topic, from locker rooms, from forums, from secondhand wellness influencers who have never read a single peer-reviewed study, is either incomplete, outdated, or flatly wrong. I am a urologist and sexual health specialist. I have spent 15 years answering this exact question in clinical settings, and I can tell you that it is one of the most common sources of completely unnecessary anxiety that men bring into my office. Men who are otherwise healthy, otherwise informed, otherwise confident, who carry quiet shame and quiet worry about something that the actual research simply does not support. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly what happens in your body, physiologically, hormonally, and psychologically when you ejaculate daily. I am going to show you the real research, not myths, not bro science, not retention philosophy dressed up as biology, actual peer-reviewed studies from urology and endocrinology journals. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand your own body with a level of clarity and confidence that almost nobody walks around with, because almost nobody has ever been given this information straight. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the channel. I am Dr. Lila Romano, intimacy counselor, marriage therapist, and sexual health specialist with over 15 years of clinical experience working with individuals and couples on exactly the kinds of questions that people are too embarrassed to ask their regular doctor. If you are new here, welcome. This is a judgment-free, evidence-based space where we talk about the body honestly and clearly. No shame, no vague euphemisms, just real science explained in plain language. If you have been here before, welcome back. You already know how we do things here. Today's topic comes up constantly in my practice, and it comes up constantly online, usually wrapped in either fear-based misinformation or unverified claims about retention and vital energy. I want to give you the actual clinical and physiological picture, because the truth, as is so often the case, is both more reassuring and more interesting than the myths. Let's start with the question everyone actually wants answered first. This is the single most common fear I hear in clinical practice, and it deserves a direct, evidence-based answer. The short answer is no. For the overwhelming majority of healthy men, ejaculation frequency, including daily ejaculation, does not meaningfully reduce baseline testosterone levels over time. Let me show you why, because the mechanism matters. Testosterone is produced continuously by the Leydig cells in the testes, regulated by a feedback loop called the hypothalamic-pituitary-gonadal axis. The hypothalamus releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which signals the pituitary gland to release luteinizing hormone, which then signals the testes to produce testosterone. This system is designed to maintain testosterone within a relatively stable range. It is not a finite reservoir that gets used up with each ejaculation. Testosterone production is closer to a continuously running tap than a tank with a limited supply. A frequently cited study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism that gets misquoted constantly online actually found something quite different from what people claim. Researchers measured testosterone levels in men following different periods of ejaculatory abstinence and found that testosterone levels showed only a brief, modest spike around the 7th day of abstinence and then returned to baseline. Critically, this study did not show that frequent ejaculation lowers testosterone. It showed a very short-term and minor fluctuation that has been wildly overstated and misrepresented across the internet as proof that abstinence dramatically boosts testosterone. A separate and more directly relevant body of research has examined ejaculation frequency and baseline hormone levels and found no clinically significant long-term reduction in testosterone associated with frequent, including daily, ejaculation in healthy men. The body's regulatory system simply does not work the way the retention narrative suggests. I think it is worth explaining why this myth persists so strongly, because understanding the psychology of misinformation helps you evaluate future claims more critically. The single small study showing a transient testosterone spike after 7 days of abstinence has been repeatedly cited, exaggerated, and stripped of its context across forums and social media, transforming a minor and temporary finding into a sweeping claim about long-term hormonal depletion that the original research never supported. I want to be clear and direct with you. There is no credible, peer-reviewed evidence that healthy men who ejaculate daily experience meaningfully lower long-term testosterone testosterone than men who abstain for extended periods. If you enjoy practicing abstinence or retention for personal, spiritual, or psychological reasons, that is entirely your choice and I respect it completely. But I want you making that choice based on accurate information, not fear of hormonal depletion that the science does not support. This next one is particularly important because the actual research points in the opposite direction of what most people assume. One of the most significant studies on this topic was published in European Urology in 2016, using data from the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, a massive, long-running cohort involving nearly 32,000 men tracked over multiple decades. Researchers found that men who reported ejaculating 21 or more times per month had a statistically significant lower risk of prostate cancer compared to men who ejaculated 4 to 7 times per month. The relationship was not subtle. It represented approximately a 20% reduction in risk. This finding has been replicated in earlier research as well. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2004, also drawing on a large cohort, found a similar pattern, with higher ejaculation frequency associated with reduced prostate cancer risk later in life. While the exact biological mechanism is still being researched, the leading hypothesis is what researchers call the stagnation hypothesis. The idea that regular ejaculation may help clear potentially carcinogenic compounds and cellular debris from the prostate ducts, reducing the concentration of substances that could otherwise contribute to abnormal cell changes over time. There is also research suggesting that regular ejaculation may reduce prostatic inflammation, which is itself a known risk factor for prostate pathology. I want to be careful and precise here, because correlation in large observational studies is not the same as definitive proof of causation. And prostate cancer risk is influenced by many factors, including genetics, age, diet, and overall health. But I can tell you confidently that the body of evidence we currently have does not support the idea that frequent ejaculation harms the prostate. If anything, the data trends toward a protective association. Some men ask me specifically about daily ejaculation rather than the 21 times per month threshold used in these studies, which works out to roughly 5 times per week. Daily ejaculation, 7 times per week, falls comfortably within or above the range associated with the protective effect identified in this research. There is no evidence threshold at which daily frequency becomes harmful to the prostate in healthy men. This question has actually been studied directly in sports science contexts because it matters for athletes and coaches who want evidence-based guidance rather than locker room folklore. A study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research examined the effects of sexual activity, including ejaculation, the night before athletic performance testing, and found no significant negative effect on strength, power output, or aerobic capacity the following day. Other research, including a frequently cited study from 2016 published in PLOS One, examined grip strength, vertical jump, and other performance markers following sexual activity, and similarly found no meaningful impairment. The popular belief that athletes should abstain before competition to preserve performance appears to be a persistent myth rather than an evidence-based practice. Many men do report a subjective sense of fatigue or sleepiness following ejaculation, and this is real, but the mechanism is not hormonal depletion. After orgasm, there is a measurable release of prolactin, along with shifts in oxytocin and a relaxation of the parasympathetic nervous system. This combination produces what is sometimes called the post-orgasmic refractory state, characterized by relaxation and often sleepiness. This is a normal neurochemical response, not evidence of your body being drained of some finite resource. It typically resolves within minutes to an hour and has no bearing on your strength, your hormone levels the next day, or your long-term physical capacity. If you are training seriously and you genuinely feel that ejaculation the night before negatively affects your performance, that subjective experience matters, and you should structure your routine in whatever way feels best for you. But I want you to know clearly that the controlled research we have does not support a generalized physiological performance cost to ejaculation frequency, including daily frequency, for the vast majority of men. Now I want to move from the physiological myths into the area where I think the real, clinically meaningful conversation actually lives. Because frequency alone, in isolation, is rarely the right question. The research on this is genuinely nuanced, and I want to walk you through it carefully because this is where I think most online content gets it it wrong by oversimplifying in either direction. Daily ejaculation by itself is not inherently a clinical concern for the majority of men. However, the context and the relationship a person has with the behavior matters significantly. Research published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions and other sexual health literature distinguishes between high-frequency sexual behavior that is experienced as pleasurable, intentional, and integrated into a person's life without distress, versus compulsive patterns characterized by a felt loss of control, escalating use as a primary coping mechanism for stress or negative emotion, and significant personal distress or interference with daily functioning, work, or relationships. The frequency number itself, whether that is once a day, twice a week, or 3 times a day, is far less clinically significant than these qualitative factors. A man who masturbates daily, feels good about it, experiences no distress, and maintains healthy relationships and responsibilities is in a fundamentally different clinical category than a man who masturbates daily but experiences it as compulsive, distressing, or as an escape from emotional pain he is avoiding addressing directly. If you notice that the behavior feels driven by anxiety, sadness, or avoidance rather than by genuine desire and pleasure, that is worth paying attention to, not because the frequency itself is dangerous, but because it may be signaling an underlying emotional need that deserves direct attention, whether through self-reflection, lifestyle changes, or speaking with a therapist. For men in partnered relationships, I want to add an important clinical observation from my work as a couples therapist specifically. Solo sexual activity and partnered sexual activity are not in fundamental competition with each other for the vast majority of healthy couples, and frequent ejaculation through masturbation does not inherently reduce desire or capacity for partnered intimacy. However, communication matters enormously here. I have worked with couples where one partner felt confused, rejected, or insecure about their partner's masturbation habits, not because of any physiological reality, but because of unspoken assumptions and a lack of open conversation about what solo sexual activity means and does not mean within their relationship. An open, non-judgmental conversation about this topic, approached with curiosity rather than accusation, is almost always more productive than silence, assumption, or shame on either side. I want to spend some time now on what actually does meaningfully affect sexual function, energy, and hormonal health. Because while ejaculation frequency itself is largely a non-issue for healthy men, there are real factors worth your attention. Sleep is one of the most significant and most underappreciated factors in male hormonal health. Research published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that men who slept 5 hours or fewer per night for 1 week showed testosterone levels 10 to 15% lower than after a full night's sleep. This effect size dwarfs anything associated with ejaculation frequency. If you are concerned about testosterone, sleep quality and duration deserve far more of your attention than how often you ejaculate. Chronic psychological stress elevates cortisol, and cortisol has a well-documented suppressive relationship with testosterone production through the same hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis I described earlier. Chronic unmanaged stress is a far more significant threat to your hormonal health and sexual function than your ejaculation frequency will ever be. Adequate hydration supports healthy semen volume and overall physiological function, though there is no evidence that ejaculation frequency itself causes meaningful dehydration or fluid depletion that would require special compensation. General cardiovascular health, regular exercise, a nutrient-dense diet, and maintaining a healthy weight all have a far more substantial, well-documented impact on erectile function, hormone levels, and sexual vitality than ejaculation frequency does. Regular alcohol consumption suppresses testosterone production and impairs erectile function through multiple mechanisms, including direct testicular toxicity and central nervous system effects. If you are looking for a genuinely high-leverage change to support your sexual health, examining your alcohol consumption will yield far more meaningful results than restricting ejaculation frequency. I want you to walk away from this section understanding that your energy is far better spent optimizing sleep, managing stress, maintaining cardiovascular health, and moderating alcohol than worrying about how often you ejaculate. Let me bring all of this together into practical guidance you can actually use. First, there is is no universal correct or healthy frequency that applies to every man. The research simply does not support a specific number as optimal or maximal. Individual variation in libido, relationship context, life circumstances, and personal preference all play a legitimate role. Second, daily ejaculation. For the vast majority of healthy men, is not harmful to testosterone, is not harmful to the prostate, and may in fact be associated with reduced prostate cancer risk, and does not meaningfully impair physical performance or recovery. Third, pay attention to the qualitative experience rather than the number. Ask yourself honestly, does this feel like a healthy, pleasurable part of my life? Or does it feel compulsive, distressing, or like an avoidance strategy for something else going on emotionally? That question matters far more than counting frequency. Fourth, if you are in a relationship, talk openly with your partner about solo sexual activity, rather than letting assumptions and silence create insecurity or confusion on either side. Fifth, direct your genuine health concerns toward the factors that actually move the needle: sleep, stress management, cardiovascular health, alcohol moderation, and regular exercise. These will do far more for your testosterone, your sexual function, and your overall vitality than restricting or obsessing over ejaculation frequency ever will. And finally, if you notice persistent anxiety specifically about this topic, anxiety that is affecting your quality of life, your relationships, or your ability to enjoy intimacy without guilt or fear, that anxiety itself is worth addressing directly, whether through accurate information like what you have received today, or through speaking with a therapist who specializes in sexual health. You deserve to relate to your own body with confidence and peace, not fear rooted in misinformation. Let's bring this all together. Today you learned that daily ejaculation does not meaningfully deplete long-term testosterone levels in healthy men. The regulatory system in your body simply does not work the way the popular retention narrative claims. You learned that the best large-scale research we have actually associates higher ejaculation frequency with a reduced, not increased, risk of prostate cancer. You learned that controlled sports science research shows no meaningful negative effect on physical strength or performance. You learned that what actually matters clinically is not the frequency itself, but whether the behavior feels healthy, intentional, and free of compulsion or distress. And you learned that sleep, stress management, cardiovascular health, and alcohol moderation have a far greater genuine impact on your hormonal and sexual health than ejaculation frequency ever will. Here is what I want you to take from this video above everything else. Your body is not a depleting resource that punishes you for experiencing pleasure. The shame and anxiety that so many men carry around this topic is built on misinformation, not science. You deserve accurate information about your own body, and you deserve to relate to your sexuality with confidence rather than fear. If this video gave you clarity, gave you relief, or corrected something you had believed for years, please give it a like right now. It genuinely helps this accurate information reach the men who are still carrying unnecessary anxiety about this exact question. Subscribe if you have not already. I publish every week on men's sexual health, relationship science, and the honest, evidence-based conversations that most channels are too uncomfortable to have clearly. And leave me a comment. Tell me what myths you grew up believing about this topic. Tell me what surprised you most in this video. This community learns from each other, and your honesty might be exactly what another man needs to read today. Coming up next on this channel, what your morning erections are actually telling you about your cardiovascular health, the truth about semen retention and what the research actually says versus what online communities claim, and the 5 habits that genuinely move the needle on testosterone after 40. Until next time, take care of your body, seek out accurate information, and remember, understanding your own physiology is not vanity. It is health, it is confidence, and it starts right here. I am Dr. Lila Romano. I will see you in the next one.